Hello and thanks for stopping by. This is Borrowed Time for the Commodore 64, released by Activision in 1985. It was released on a few other systems as well, the Apple II and the Commodore Amiga. This is basically a crossover of a point-and-click game and a text-adventure game. You play a private eye in the 1930s that someone is trying to kill. Your job is to not get killed and collect enough evidence to bring to the police so they can arrest whoever the villain is. The game opens up to a startup screen as some big guy punching a fist through your office door window. Pretty cool way to start a game, I think. This is still the first disc, and it offers you two options. You can press 1 and play the game directly, or you can press 2 and go through a tutorial on how to actually play the game. It's actually a pretty good explanation, this tutorial. If this were only a page or two of information, I'd probably show it in the video, but it's actually much longer than I expected and would probably take up most of this video if I showed it. It's really nice to have it there, though. It's very cool. I was surprised when this game loaded and I first saw the interface. I understood exactly what was going on right away. This sort of basic layout is not completely uncommon for a Commodore 64 game of that era. Basically, they would isolate parts of the screen to contain different graphical elements. Here, we only have a window on the left side of the screen that displays graphics, while the other areas of the screen have static commands that you can select, or there's a text input window in the bottom half. I'm sure this helps speed and processing of the game on the actual machine, because you don't have an entire window's worth of graphics to display. It also kind of makes the game options a little easier to understand. There may be more commands that you can use that aren't listed, but all the basic commands you can use are there, and that should be a pretty good guide to getting this game underway. I think it's important to note that when words appear on screen, they should be readable, but there were a few times in my game where certain words were a little blurred. I'm guessing this is because the graphics are programmed to display in a particular type of monitor for the Commodore, and modern HDMI outputs are different. I guess it could be a setting as well. It's not all text in the game, just some of it. You can use the keyboard here or the joystick, or both. If you've entered no commands in the command window and you press the return key, the graphic window will also disappear. You can use this to toggle it on and off if you'd like. Sometimes it's useful if you want to see the text that just scrolled behind the window. Also, the first time I played, after only a few moments, I got gunned down. So this isn't an easy one. You get wiped up pretty quick, you get thrown into it really fast. It took me a few minutes before I figured out a few basic things, and then it did get pretty intense. I was not expecting it to get this crazy so quick. Basically, you leave your office, and there are these thugs that are already walking up the stairs coming to kill you. At this stage, it's basically a flat-out race, and you're being chased. At this stage, the intensity of the game here, or at least the beginning part of the game, is great, and I'm all in at this point. This intensity actually reminded me of another game. This reminded me of the Call of Cthulhu Dark Corners of the Earth. I know that game came out 20 years later, and it's a totally different style of game, but there's this intense chase in that game that really got me sort of on the edge of my seat, and I kind of felt like this game did the same thing. I got gunned down in this pursuit a lot, an awful lot. Definitely take notes as you go, and make sure to save your game often. The game does have a save game feature at the top you can use, or you can use save states, I suppose, if you're using a C64. I managed to survive the immediate danger after a while, and then, once I got down to the street, you'll need to start worrying about a map and where things are located. I'm going to have to say, I tried to shoot some thugs outright, and I thought that I would be able to do this eventually, considering usually I had the upper hand, but I never seem to be able to shoot a thug, but they can certainly get me with no problem. You're also on some sort of a ticking clock of some sort. I thought maybe it was just the beginning scene, but I find that if I sit out in the open too long trying commands to figure out what's going on, someone's going to show up and shoot me. I think they do a pretty good job here making the graphics interesting, at least for a Commodore 64 game. I think this is kind of what you'd expect and kind of what you'd hope for. There's something on screen that you can visually understand, which is nice, and it really helps set the mood for what's going on here. It's not all easy though. There's a lot of trial and error just trying to figure out the right commands to use. Now, I've mentioned this in other videos. I have save states usually with the C64, so it's a little easier to run the scenarios over and over again. Well, at least you can run them quicker. If this was on the original hardware, I imagine that the loading time would have to be considerably longer. It always seemed to be when I was a kid. Here, as I've been figuring things out in the correct commands to use, I've been writing them down. It was very useful for redoing sections, and it also made recording this footage a lot easier. It's definitely the type of game where writing things down is going to be useful. Now, back in its heyday, it was almost a given that you should write these things down. There weren't cheat manuals or an internet to go to just get the next stages. I read the entire manual that came with this game, and on the back page, there's an offer at the bottom where you could have mailed in $1, and they would have mailed you a small hint guide of some sort. It's kind of nice that they would offer that. I think it's unique. I thought I was making it reasonably far in this game, or at least I figured I was out of the immediate danger from the start, but these thugs love to jump me and gun me down on the street. I did find a walkthrough online, and I only glanced at a couple of sentences. I missed a few basic steps, so, like a lot of games, this lets you get through certain sections without doing some things, and ultimately that will have an effect later in the game, with you not having certain information that you might need down the road to complete a task. Basically, at the start of the game, I neglected to read the case files in the cabinet. I saw that there was a cabinet there, but I assumed I didn't need to read each one. But my understanding now is that there's some information in those files that's probably going to be important later in the game. I have to say, I've looked at a few similar Commodore 64 games on this channel, specifically text-based games that add some sort of a graphical element. For those games, the graphics that I've been looking at so far, they're really only representations to set the mood. There was really not much in terms of elements in the pictures that weren't referenced in the text. Here, there are items that you can interact with in the graphics that aren't mentioned in the text. So, the text won't say that there is a cabinet in front of you, but because you can see a cabinet, you can actually, in some cases, interact with that, which is nice. Overall, I have to say I really like this one. There are a lot of action and puzzle elements that sort of come together at different times. I'm a fan of this one. I'm going to play it some more. Like I said, I got through the first main wave of difficulty, and now I'm sort of wandering the streets looking for what I need to do next. It's a pretty interesting story. I like the way it's set in the 30s, and it's kind of clever. Well, that's all I have for borrowed time for the Commodore 64. Thanks for stopping by, and I'll see you next time.